people speak to us from different paradigms and they create moral conundrums and problems. For example, the liberal paradigm or the feminist paradigm. They speak with a certain kind of assumption. So can you name one of the assumptions of liberalism? Put your hand up and name an assumption. Yes.
The individual's experiences and sensations of life.
Right, so the privacy of the individual. The individual should be prioritized. Yeah? And you're right, that would include his interests and so on. Feminism, one of the assumptions of second wave feminism, in particular, is what? Yes. Justice and equality are synonymous, effectively. They are two sides of the same coin. And we start off by saying that actually society recognizes on consequential grounds, yes, we said, Hamza mentioned the different types of ethics, the ontological ethics and consequential ethics. Really, virtue ethics is not restricted. So really all of the Western ethical systems go back to these two. On consequential grounds, society has realized that you cannot have equality even of opportunity in all situations. Because there are some things that people of different ages and abilities would disadvantage themselves and others if they did. Then we ask the question, okay, this puts a spanner in the woodworks when it comes to the idea of equality and justice being the same thing. Because we're saying here, if there's a difference that is noticeable enough, that is distinguished enough, that could create a situation where equality and justice are not the same thing. And we gave an example of a blind man driving a bus. And we gave an example of children, for example, putting an older child in a younger child's class. These are just simple examples. We also gave the example of warfare and the fact that throughout history, even in liberal countries, even feminists have not objected to the fact that men have been sometimes forcibly put on the front lines. Now, these are just some examples of where difference is respected, and that shows you that actually a new tailored, customized law is required. In this session, we are going to continue this line of reasoning. And we're going to speak specifically of some of the main contentions people have of Islam using a feminist paradigm. Some of the main ahkam of Islam, because we don't want this to be abstract, we want to be very specific. And we will show, in the first instance, okay, how differences are important in recognizing the potential wisdoms of these things. So go to the first slide. As you can see, there are four things I mentioned here, and obviously this is not an exhaustive list, but there are four things here which many people speak about when they talk about Islamic laws. Number one, polygyny. Because they say, how is it the case? It shouldn't be equality. A man can marry up to 4 women, and traditionally or classically, historically, she even has right hand possess. And the woman, she can only have one husband. The man, in the second case, for example, has a different kind of inheritance in some situations. The brother gets more than the sister. They would say this is an unfair situation, and we've already discussed this, because they assume that equality and justice are the same thing. The third thing, they will say, look at divorce in Islam. The man can just say one word, and it will be efficacious. There will be a separation that happens between the man and the woman. The woman does not have the same ability. That shows you there's an inherent inequality. They will use this kind of language. Inherent inequality in Islam. And already when they're saying inherent inequality, It's assumed that equality is always what? Wrong. You see? The fourth thing, this is once again not an exhaustive list, but I'm just giving you some of the important ones. Qawwam, the idea that the man is the maintainer, the protector, but also someone who is managerially, hierarchically higher than a woman. He can tell her what to do in certain situations, but she cannot do the same thing to him. In that, there's obedience, connected to da'ah or obedience to the husband. Of course, that has its conditions and so on, but these are the things that people traditionally say. How is it the case, if Islam is a religion of justice, that you have these inherent inequalities in Islam? Okay, so we'll go to the first slide after this. Let's start with our assumptions. We're saying the following, it's the point we're making, and I want you to remember the following. We do believe that a man and a woman in Islam have equal value, equal spiritual value. And there are many verses that indicate that in the Quran. You know, many verses. We don't need to enumerate them now. But if a man does something, a woman does something good, they're equally valuable from the Islamic perspective. But it doesn't mean, just because they're equally valuable, that their roles should be identical. As we said, because there are some differences associated with the collective temperaments and anatomies of men versus the collective temperaments and anatomies of women. So we would say, in a nutshell, equality of value doesn't mean identicality of roles. And for example, go back to you've got year 5, year 6, year 1, year 2, right? Now these kids, they're valuable, most of them are valuable. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, the blind man is as valuable as a man who can see. But it doesn't mean that they should be allowed to do the same things. You see? So the question now is, are the differences profound enough for us to make legislative change such that, for example, a man can marry more than one wife and can have an easier thing for divorce or this and that? That's where the question should be. So what we need to discover or discuss is the evidence for difference. Today, we're going to start with that. It's a very simple thing. Everyone here should understand. The first difference is scientific. Men have in their bodies testosterone. It's a hormone. Now, this hormone is responsible for many functions: aggressivity, anger, sexual desire, even libido, and so on. Men, on average, have 10 times to 20 times more testosterone in their bodies than women do. What really differentiates a boy from a man? One of the key things that differentiates a boy from a man is testosterone. Now, it's a matter of fact that is the case. If you get the average percentile of a woman and a man, you'll find that there's a massive difference. No one can deny it. Okay, here's some scientific journals, David Handelsman, where I got this information here. Yeah, this is a scientific journal. I'm giving you the data. Go to the next slide. Cognitive differences. Now you might think, okay, well, cognitive, now you're going quite deep. This is a bit dangerous now. Cognitive means how you think. As you can see, there's even studies which indicate that there are differences in cognitive ability. Now, this one, Diane Halpern, very interesting. She's a scientist and she's a feminist. And she started off, she said, look, I was going to investigate men and women and how they think. Yes? And in the beginning, she said, I thought, she says this openly. She says, I thought when I started my investigation that it would be the same. She goes, however, when I started doing the experiments, and she's a scientist, on the samples, she realized that there were noticeable differences between men and women in cognitive thinking and the way they think. Now, it doesn't mean men are more intelligent, although it can have an impact, especially during menstruation. Now, that sounds extremely provocative. And I wouldn't say such a thing unless I had the backing with me. As you can see, This is an Indian biologist here. And she has shown, and it's interesting, it's always women that are doing these studies. False is the case, it's not the male bias. Even feminists are doing it. She has shown that when women are menstruating, in fact, they do these tests, which are not like IQ tests, but kind of cognitive tests, and they perform worse than when they're not menstruating, indicating that menstruation has an impact on how you think, on how clever you are, on how you can make decisions. Your decision making is impaired when you are menstruating. Now that sounds very provocative. Once again, that's not what I'm saying. No, it's not. And it makes sense, then Allah has given concession to women in this time because majority of people say you shouldn't. I mean, in fact, all the scholars say you shouldn't divorce your wife when she's menstruating. I think, most scholars say if she is menstruating and you divorce her, then it's efficacious. It will be, Ibn Taymiyyah didn't believe this. But the vast majority, 99% of the scholars believe that. If you divorce your wife when she's menstruating, it's not allowed. It's not allowed to do that. But it will still count. But the idea of menstruation, therefore, is problematic for the feminist discourse. And of course, there's a hadith, which is very provocative hadith for many feminists. One of the most provocative ones, where there is from Sa'id al-Khudri, that the Prophet said that women are not beside aql and deen. This is great shubha on people. So aql, what does the aql mean? And deen, and religion as well. Most scholars say deen meaning like you cannot pray in certain times, it's no fault of our own. The controversy is not really in this, just meaning. The controversy is in the first part, which means that women are not beside aql, which means that they translate it as deficient in intelligence rationality, which is not really the correct translation because aql includes your ability to control your emotions. The Arabs used the word aqal, the horse. You put the thing over your head like that and you steer the horse left or right. It's aqal. A jahil is not just an ignorant person. A jahil is someone who cannot control their emotions. Effectively, therefore, the hadith is telling you, yes, women cannot control their emotions as well as men, en masse, if you consider all the emotions. Of course, someone can say, well, look at aggressivity. Men are much more angry than women. And the evidence of that is 95% of inmates are in prison. We respond and we say that doesn't show men are more aggressive. It just shows that men have more cost-bearing power, meaning that they have the capability of exerting as much cost as would lead them to a prison. For example, there's a study that was done to show that how women and men express aggression is different. So a man will express aggression through violence. A woman will express aggression, the study would say, through, for example, backbiting, gossiping, passive aggression, and all of this. It's just the manifestation is different. But even if we, for the sake of argument, accept that men are more aggressive and angrier than women, it's for the sake of argument. That's just one emotion. Of course, there's different definitions of what emotions are. On mass of aggregates, what the hadith is telling us is that on mass, men have a better ability to control their emotions than women. That's what the hadith indicates. And the hadith continues and says that I've seen the majority of inhabitants of the hell as women and so on. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani says to us because the majority of population is women. It doesn't mean because the majority of women. But nevertheless, it indicates that this emotionality could lead someone to the hellfire. For al-ashir, it says. Which means that women are en masse collectively more ungrateful than men. And you say, what's the evidence for that? There is evidence for that. In psychology, they have something called the Big Five. It's the gold standard for, most psychologists use it to understand the differences between different people. It's called Big Five personality traits. One of those is called neuroticism, trait neuroticism. And trait neuroticism includes, but is not limited to, someone looking at a situation in a pessimistic manner. So those who are more trait neurotic are more ungrateful because they look at things in a negative way all the time. Effectively, all the studies that have been done in any part of the world has shown that women have more trait neuroticism than men. In any part of the world. In Africa, in Asia, in every part of the world. These are studies that are done in the Western enterprise. So the fact that the collective temperament of women is that it is more likely that they will become ungrateful than men is something clearly delineated in the works of psychology. There's nothing controversial about it. When you look at it from an evidence perspective, and you don't look at it from an emotional perspective. When you look at it from an evidence perspective, yes, women are more neurotic than men, more ungrateful than men. And when they're menstruating, their decision making is more impaired than they would be otherwise, and than men. These are facts now. In fact, there's no study that indicates the opposite. So we continue to the next slide. Sexual differences. Now, this is going to become more controversial. This is a study that is the biggest of its kind. I've not seen a bigger study that has done on this topic, which is the study of Baumeister and Cantonese. It was like 3 or 4 researchers, and there's, I think, 50,000 participants or something like that. Okay, huge study, psychological study. One of the participants was a woman, Cantonese. I think her first name was Erica or something. And they wanted to find out whose sex drive is more. Is it the man or the woman? And the conclusion is right in front of your eyes, which is they are forced to say the sex drive of men is much more than the sex drive of women. How do you define sex drive? Frequency. How much a man wants to have intercourse or wants to engage in sexual behavior. Variety. Intensity. Every single way which is logically possible. Men's sex drive is more than women's sex drive. That's the conclusion. It's not my conclusion. I'm just saying that anecdotal experience. This is the biggest study of its kind that's ever been done. Yes. So yeah, this is the study. As you can see, 2001. Pretty in psychological terms, it's actually a pretty recent study. So already starting to understand. If we're being honest about the situation, and we're not sugarcoating the situation, that there are profound, major differences between men and women. Major differences between men and women, which have been evidenced by the most cutting-edge recent investigations that we have to our disposal. In fact, I was reading this particular study, it said there is no study which actually indicates the opposite. That's how confident they were of their conclusion. They said there was no, that one of the, it was Baumeister himself, said, to my knowledge, no one disagrees with this. Like on a psychological level. So here you have the intensity of the male sex drive is so much stronger. Their decision making is different to the woman's one. The emotionality of the woman is different to the man's. Testosterone is higher in their body. And it's at a level to 20-to-1 ratio. 10 to 1 to 20-to-1 difference. These are all scientific matters. And you're telling me that there's not enough to indicate that some of them should have different rules? No. Now you have to justify yourself. Now you have to provide the evidence. Go to the next slide. So we continue with the sexual differences. And this is very interesting. Honestly, I'm not sure if you've ever come across this. The willingness of men to have sex versus women. And this is very explicit, but I apologize for this. This study would never be replicated now. The Clark and Hatfield study, they've done it twice. Once in 1978 and once in 1991. This is a very interesting situation. They went to this place in campus. The woman was there, the men were there. And the woman would ask a man. Some women, some men, different women, different types of men. 3 questions. First question is, would you go out with me tonight? Yes. The second question is, would you come over to my apartment tonight? Amen. This is coming out order now. The third one, listen to this. Would you go to bed with me tonight? This is a stranger. Yeah. Let's take a look at the results of this. As you can see, men, 75% of men who are asked by stranger women, do you want to go to bed tonight? Say yes. Now, guess how many women said yes? 0. 0% of women said yes. Now, what does that show you? They have two completely different ideas of sex. I mean, 0 to 75% ratio. That is, sorry to say, that is close. But interestingly, women were more likely to answer yes to the first question, which is about a date or something. Would you come out with, men are not really interested as much, 50%. People will be thinking, have to go on a date to spend money on this one. I have to do this, and I might not even be guaranteed. No, but that's how the thought process is. I'm sorry to say. But it shows you that there's a massive difference between how the man thinks and how women think from a sexual perspective. It's not just something which is scientific, but it's action like that. And this is a study which will never be cleared on an ethics committee now. Yeah, you will never ever be able to get this study replicated. Because now they have Q and this one and that one, there's no chance it will clear. But this is an interesting study. It's been replicated more than one time. But then this shows you what men think, how they think. Now, maybe many women in the audience will find this absolutely strange. Is this what men would do? Well, I'll be honest with you, yes. I mean, the thing that stops us as Muslims is Islam and the restrictions and the commands of Allah. Otherwise, we would all be like this. I mean, maybe 25% of us women, maybe, I don't know. No, you cannot. It's only Islam that has saved us from being like these animals. Anybody comes to the man and he's like a stranger. It's like one question, hello, how are you doing? You're like, yes. Go to bed tonight. Yeah, no problem. What time should it be? Where is it? It's not the best. Do you know what I mean? The woman. So that's another thing. We go to the next study. And even the child is disgusted by the situation. When you know that the true motivations of my goes the next one. Now, this is it's a red pill thing. They one of their pillars mentioned. And this is one of the only things they say which is actually backed by evidence. A lot of things they say not backed by any evidence. Like before the break, we were asking about, the role of Marcy and these individuals, and they talk about having intercourse with so many women that makes you a true man and stuff like that, which it doesn't make any sense. Because even I looked at it, there's some studies on casual sex. It's called casual sex, sorry to be explicit. And I tried to see if it actually does make you, if it does have any benefits, like having casual sex and stuff. And there's no evidence that it does for a man. It doesn't increase his confidence, it doesn't increase his security, it doesn't any of that stuff. And the idea that somehow doing all of these things, it makes you know women more. I promise you, this 30 minutes that you just had speaking to me, is probably you know women more than if you would have done that strategy. Because this is a study that has thousands of people, and I'm just giving you the cream of it. Likewise, women now and then thinking, this is how now. Yeah, men have bad intentions. That's why this is have to be careful. You have to be careful in the situation. So it's not even bad intentions, they're natural intentions, but they can be bad if they're packaged in a certain way. Now, this hypergamy thing is something which is, I mean, you've heard it, you must have heard this book. Put your hand on the birth this one. Okay, I'm going to test you if you have. So now you put your hands back down, didn't you? Put your hands on this one before. Okay, go on, what is it?
Basically, a lady would like a man that's high in social status or financial status.
Yeah, that's good. So a woman would like a man that's they call it high value. It's that really in these studies, they don't use that term, high value man. This term is a new thing. It doesn't mean anything. For us, high value man is always be man. This is what high value man is, not how much his money has got. But we just say across enough dominant hierarchies. So if he's got more money, effectively, if he's got more money, yeah. Now the thing is this, is that I actually disagree with this to some extent. I agree with it to some extent and disagree. This is not on Muslim women and Muslim men. And that's a huge, important factor. The idea is, yes, of course, a woman would want a man with more money because she wants to try to have a better life. But she won't do that, in my opinion, which I think is bad, at the expense of religion. Like, how many Muslim women marry Christian rich people? You don't find it, it's not statistically prevalent. So it's not the strongest factor. But for non-Muslim women, hypergamy is the strongest factor. That's why, I'm not sure if you've seen these videos of a man with a supercar. I saw one particular guy, a man with a supercar. I think it was an Arab country, yeah? He had like a Ferrari or something, and he believed in this so much. He stopped the car, he said, listen, I'm a rich guy, please get in the car. That's what he said, and the woman said, I'm not interested. Because he believed in this so much, it's like an ask for a faith. But hypergamy is true to the extent that, of course, it makes sense. There's nothing wrong with that. Even the Prophet ﷺ said that the woman is married for 4 things, and one of them, money. However, in no way mentions that doesn't mean that you should marry a woman for money. It means that this is what happens. So it's more a state of affairs than it is a state of, it's not a command. The only command is at the end of the hadith of the dead people, which is that, choose the religious woman. So anyway, this thing about hypergamy is true to some extent, but don't generalize it too much to the Muslim community. The idea that one wants a dominant man or a strong man or something like that is not true, no problem. But there's hypergamy and there's homogamy as well. Homogamy is in effect the opposite of hypergamy, which is that a woman wants to choose a man kind of like that. Yeah, an Indian woman is likely to marry an Indian man. Especially in India, I'm not saying it big just yet. No, but it's true. But a black woman is likely to marry a black man. That's what happens nowadays. And obviously, a Muslim woman is likely to marry, very, very, very likely to marry a Muslim man. That's what they're going to do. Obviously, from our perspective, that's the only indicator that would be valid anyway. But that's what I'm saying. So these are differences. A man doesn't have that much of a proclivity to the other side, although there is some proclivity. Like a man, maybe there's a very rich woman, you might want to marry her. It's true. But the proclivity on the other side is more. That's the difference between men and women. Go to the next slide. So these are some studies. I've just given 2 studies for each state. Okay? You've got them here. The cream one that I said before, this was the biggest one that everyone finds. This one is a secondary one, just in case everyone wants more references. That's fine, but it's the same point being made, which is because I started looking at, okay, what types of hypergamy is there? I realized that actually educational hypergamy does exist. Like a woman wants to marry a man usually who's got more education than that. But it's not as strong as the financial one. The financial one is king in the Western world. I mean, she would marry somebody who is no degree, nothing, not even GCSEs or whatever, high school education, but he's a millionaire. He's got business owner, he's got this and that is more a predictor of what would happen sociologically. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so actually these are interesting things. These are divorce statistics, okay? It's not really, I mean, these are good if you want to know what the divorce statistics, why people get divorced. These are some studies that you can look at in your own time, okay? You might know if you're interested, as to why people get married. But the idea is the following. Just one idea that I want to get from this. If you've had premarital sex, zina, you commit zina, you're more likely to have divorce. This is now established in the sociological literature. And if someone commits zina, they're more white because they don't value relationships. And interestingly, if you divorce, you're more likely to get divorced again. Man and woman. If a man divorces once, you pull the trigger once, then you pull the trigger twice, and 3 times, and 4, maybe 5. So these are just some interesting statistics. We'll go to the next one. And love is interesting because you think that women love more than men. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the, if you like, misconception. Because I was looking at first of all, what is love? And there's different definitions. Mostly, the most bog standard definition of love is follows: is that it's an emotional attachment which brings about some kind of pleasure. Gottfried Leibniz had a very interesting definition of love, which is that love is when someone wants happiness for somebody else. Very romantic definition, really. Whereas George Bernard Shaw had a very unromantic definition, where he said that love is the overestimation of someone over the other people. So you overestimate somebody. When you love someone, you overestimate. But al-Hub in the Arabic language is mailan. Really, if you look at ista'alluq, mailan, or the idea of attachment. So it's the psychological definition of love and the linguistic Arabic definition is concurrent. It is an attachment. Now, when we consider that as what love is, obviously the Greeks have divisions of it. Platonic love, romantic love. I mean, the word pedophilia, where does it come from? Pedo means the love of children. Philia means love. Yeah? So they have different kinds of love. I think they have like 7 categories. But the point is, when you look at the studies on love, you find that there is no evidence whatsoever that women love more than men. This is actually very interesting. Men and women, if there's going to be equality or something, love the same. The intensity of love, the reported grief after a particular love. Although, I will say one thing interesting here. If there's studies being done on it's called post-relationship grief. Like grief after a relationship has ended. And a woman, when she first gets divorced, or let's say a breakup happens, she finds it hard. But the man finds it hard afterwards, according to the study in Bristol University. It's a very interesting way that dynamic works. However, love is something which men do with women and women do with men. There's no evidence that one is more than the other. And that's interesting because the Quran says, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. بينهم. Yeah, so بينكم, you put between you love and mercy. Between you. It doesn't indicate that the Sharia doesn't indicate that one person loves more than the other. You see, it's so interesting, whatever the Sharia indicates, through exceptional rules, it's all evidence. Yani, let's go back to Naqisat al-Aql. The idea of like a woman deficient in this way. It would actually be controversial from a scientific perspective if the Sharia said no. Yani, if we're looking at a scientist or psychologist, or if this was not recognized in Sharia, the enemy would actually have a good argument against us and say, why did the Sharia not take into consideration between men and women? Doesn't seem to indicate the differences that they will have. Can you see the point? That would be a stronger, because it's a scientific argument, it's a psychological argument. But this one is a moral, ideological argument. And as we've established, the moralities of the Westerners have not been established. Their science is the best thing they've got going for them. It's very interesting because Carl Jung said something, who was one of the great psychologists of the 20th century. He said the West are giants, are technological giants, and they are moral dwarfs. We'll say this one more time. Carl Jung said that the West, they're technological giants, but they are moral dwarfs. But somehow, some way, we've attached their capabilities in the industries of science and technology with their false moralities. We give them credit for what they've done in technology and science. In fact, to be honest, they have outstripped the Muslim world in the last 100 years. They have outstripped them. And we are not ashamed to recognize that fact. When it comes to morality, they have not outstripped them. But because one thing has happened, we assume the other has happened as well. SubhanAllah, I was reading something, رَبَّنَا لَا تَجْعَلْنَا فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. In the Quran. Oh Allah, do not make us a tribulation for the disbelievers. Ibn Kathir narrates on this particular verse. He says, by losing wars. Because when you lose wars, the enemy thinks if the Muslim loses the war, the religion must be wrong. They make a fallacious connection, a wrong connection between power and truth. There is no, you can be one person, the whole world is against you, you can have the truth, and they can have the falsehood. But because human beings are swayed by balances of power, we get these complexes, inferiority, colonial complexes, where we think just because the Western man is right on these issues, he must be right on these issues. But the science of the West is telling us we're right, whereas their morality is telling us we're wrong. It's such an interesting situation. And now there is a backlash in the West, Because people are recognizing these studies and citing them. We'll go to the next slide. And interestingly, this guy, Robert Epstein, not the famous Epstein one, not this one. There's a guy called Epstein, he had like this pleasure island or something, children, or something. And he killed himself in the prison. And so this guy is not him. He done a study, this one, very interesting. He made a study on arranged marriage. And he said, when people get arranged marriage, like, you know, Muslims we have arranged marriage. So they attack us. They say, why do you have arranged marriage? They fine, we have arranged marriage, but then 90%, 70 to 90%, I can't remember the number. It's not mentioned there. I think it's a 70 to 90% or something like that. People, they don't love each other in the beginning of the marriage. Yes, they don't really know her that much. Maybe your uncle knew her aunt, something like that. I don't know how you do that. So, yeah, or maybe the guy that does the other messaging, whatever you guys do, no problem. So the arranged marriage happens. Now you think that this arranged marriage means that the Western lifestyle is, look, I mean, why don't you get to know them first? Why don't you, test the waters or whatever it is? I mean, that's the belief of boyfriend and girlfriend, this whole false institution of boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. False institution. So they say this, we put this in place, the boyfriend girlfriend thing, so that we can see if we like the person, if we like, we'll continue with that. This slide is interesting because it says most of that doesn't actually have any impact. And most people that get arranged marriage, yes, that they end up loving the person that they even if they didn't love in the beginning. And this is actually confirmation of Allah. Allah is the one who puts love between the people and removes it from the people's hearts. So the idea of boyfriend girlfriend is a failure, actually. It's a failure. Rollo Tomasi and his books and try it out and 30 women get previewed and all this. This is all nonsense stuff. As you can see, you will end up loving the person you're married to, even if you don't love them in the beginning. So when you have your marriage meetings and you don't find the chemistry there, yes, you say, I like her. I mean, you can't not like her or him at all. You find them repugnant. So look what Robert Epstein said, and then you get into this thing and 6 months later you still find them repugnant. Then there's a real problem here. But it's just like something to work with. Yeah. It's like from either side. Then you can have in your mind that this is going to build up. But this also shows us from a Muslim perspective that we've got it all right. Our structures and institutions and our arrangements are proper arrangements, which are scientifically backed. So that's another thing. Let's go to the next slide. Polygyny. A very big topic. Especially with the brother here in the front here. So the main argument against polygamy harms women. Of course, polygamy harms women to some extent. Makes her upset and all these kind of things. But does it actually leave a lasting psychological impact and a sociological, does it create sociological harm? Does it create economic deprivation? So I looked and scoured and tried to find a study on polygamy, and there's only a few. And actually they've done it in Tanzania. I don't know why they did it there. I think they practice this polygamy quite a lot in this space. I know a lot of brothers are smiling now, already booking their tickets. And they found that there is no evidence. I mean, you can see this is David Lawson, Muhammad Abdullah or something. It's not Muhammad Abdul Jabbar. He's only got 4 wives and he's trying to push the Islamic position. There was this David Lawson. For those who admire the white man, I can guarantee you this guy is white. I can see the skin color, yes. But look who else you got, Susan James. Aha! It's always good to have those. And then you got Esther. And look at her surname, I can't even pronounce that. But it looks like an African surname. Bernard Lugowi. Now I'm sure he's not a white man. Okay, so you've got a mixture of people here. And look, this is the name of the study, you don't have to go far. No evidence that polygynous means when a man marries multiple women. Not when the man and the woman can marry, it's only when the man. It's harmful. in northern Tanzania. In fact, when you read this, it shows you that it actually can benefit the situation from an economic perspective. Guy who's a high net worth guy, not a high value man, not a high net worth guy, which is more an objective statement about how much he has in his bank. He's spreading that money to more than one family. So it diminishes poverty, it removes absolute poverty, it helps the children in situations that would otherwise not have. They know who their fathers are. And this is a problem in some parts of Africa. Let's be honest about it. People don't know who their fathers are. Islam came to protect the lineages of the people. So you know who your fathers are. If you look at the studies on people who don't know who their fathers are and see what kind of psychological trauma it causes young boys and young girls and people, this is a very problematic situation. But when you have polygyny, so it's allowing the man now to express his natural proclivity, which is more intense than that of the woman, yes, to do certain things that the woman doesn't even want to do, if we're being honest. Yeah, what woman wants to have 4 husbands? If you really ask them and do a survey on it, yes, there is not that kind of proclivity. I have asked, some people, someone will say, yes, I want to have 2. Actually. But let's imagine if you have 2, let's actually imagine it for the sake of argument. What are they going to do to each other, these 2 men? If they have any sense of self-dignity, they'll be killing each other. Because there's another thing. Jealousy is different between man and woman, the way jealousy operates. And there's studies that have been done to indicate the different. Let me give you one example. There was one study that was mentioned in a book called The Miseducation of Women by James Tooley. And it's a study on jealousy, yes? And basically they asked these people in the Philippines and Japan and these places, men and women, what would you do if you found your partner had intercourse with another person, infidelity? Yes? And what would you do if you knew your partner loved another person? You know what's really interesting about this thing? They found that women were more upset at the fact that their husbands love another woman than they were of their husbands being intimate with another woman. This was a consistent finding. Whereas the opposite literally was true for a man. If the man knew that that she loved maybe her ex-husband or something, he'd be more forgiving in his mind. But if he knew that she had been intimate with another man, this could lead to severe violence, death, and this shows you that even jealousy, the way it operates, we're not saying men and women, they have different kinds of jealousy. But the way it operates for a man is linked to that aggressive urge and violence and this kind of thing. So I'm sorry to say there is no equality here. And the jealousy of the woman, yes, it will be respected to some extent. Like for example, the Quran, if you imagine Allah says in the Quran, you cannot marry 2 sisters together. Yes? And you cannot marry a woman and her sister. Yeah, you can make a case for lineage. But if you really think about it, you can make a case for lineage. But you can make a case for jealousy as well. Maybe this level of jealousy, Allah has stopped. So this one will create too much jealousy between the sisters. He stopped that. But he didn't stop the other ones. Yeah, Allah, he knew that it would cause jealousy for the woman. But he allowed that one. But he forbade that one. So there was the adna and the a'la. There was an upper limit and there's a lower limit. So, because remember, if you think about it, Islam is a religion of comprehensivity. It's a religion which takes into consideration the aggregate of everything. So, if that is the case, really and truly, polygyny, on balance, is better for people to exist than not to exist. And you'll be surprised at the following. According to Britannica Encyclopedia, 85 to 95% of the world's population permitted polygyny. 85 to 95% permitted it. It is only in the last 100 years where it's become outlawed by many of the countries. It was never a natural understanding of how morality works that polygyny is something bad. Now, of course, this is all theoretical, but in practice, the brothers will say, that's all well and good, but these are not arguments I can use with my wife. What can I say? I say, don't say anything at all. Don't say anything at all. This is just for the non-Muslims that are attacking us. This is not to be weaponized against your wife and the female members of your family. We'll go to the next slide, please. And we talked about the big five, and this is very important. As you can see here, the big five. I mean, if you see Jordan Peterson stuff, he always talks about the five. He's actually got a peer-reviewed journal on it himself. If you know what Jordan Peterson is actually specialized in, the big five. Like that's one thing he's written lots of things. Anyway, as you can see here, gender differences in personality. There are differences in personality. Unbelievable. Like it's fundamental difference. I will mention one thing already, which is neuroticism. Neuroticism for the woman is more than for the man. You see. Openness, I don't know, I can't remember. There's 5 characteristics, and they're summarized in an acronym called OCEAN. Trait openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, and then neuroticism. I can't remember what's they stand for. I don't know. Huh? No, it's not certain. It's not. I cannot agreeability. Yeah, so agreeability women are much less agreeable than men. And marriages that don't work out is when the man and woman are disagreeable. Now I took the test of Jordan Peterson because it tells you what you are. It turns out I was 99% disagreeable. Like literally 99%. It's a good thing my wife took it as well, and she ended up being only 1% disagreeable. So as you can see, it works out. If anything did other than that, it would be a situation of catastrophe. A bit of war. Anyway, the point is that when you have 2 disagreeable people, it creates a serious problem. But men are more disagreeable than women, which makes sense because the man is meant to negotiate on behalf of the family. You're meant to negotiate monetarily and otherwise. But this trait also means that men are conflict oriented, which means they can protect better. So it's not just the fact that you got more testosterone in your body, it's that psychologically you actually have genes in your body which express a different personality structure fully than a woman. So psychologically you're different and anatomically you're different. That's too much difference to ignore, I would put to you. Because the thing is, I'm saying to you, the reason why I'm bringing this to your attention is because just by knowing the differences between men and women like this, through studies in psychology and science and so on, we can easily show why there's a need for these different things. Yani, if we go to the next slide. Oh, there's even more differences. I mean, this extroversion here and stuff. And this was actually on BBC article. And they mentioned this. I was surprised that they actually, because they don't want to mention anything about inequality, but they actually put this on BBC. One of the most influential studies in the field published in 2001, pioneering personality research, Paul Costa, and Trey, and whatever, blah, 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 minimum. Basically, yeah? So go to the next slide. And you can see it all there. I can't read all this stuff. Go to the next slide. All right. So we go back to now. We go back to our 4 things. If we go to the first slide, yes. We go back, yes. Now, yes, that one. You got polygyny, inheritance, and also co-learning. I'm going to give you guys a chance to make your own arguments now. It's not just about me, it's about you as well. So now imagine, I'm a feminist. Okay? Imagine I'm a feminist. That would be a disaster. That would be an alternate universe. Not imagine that. But imagine I'm a feminist. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Look, I'm going to challenge you on those 4 things. Polygyny, inheritance, divorce, and co-learning. What I want you to do is work with the person next to you. 1, 2, yeah, and women the same. Work with the person next to you in using the information that I provided on gender difference to draft a justification and the response to those who attack you on those 4 bases. Does that make sense? So now you're going to imagine I'm going to come up with a picture at random, and you're going to say based on this study, based on this study, and I want you to end in the following way. You need to start with the assumption. So you say your assumption is this. That what's the assumption? We'll cover the assumption. That equality is justice. Yes. Or your assumption is equality of value means identicality of roles. This is how you're going to start. Then you're going to say, however, on this point, so A is also A, assumption. And then you go for P, which is you're going to make your point. And then you're going to use E. This is your structure. E stands for example. Yes? So you're going to use one of the studies outside. C is counter argument. Some may say this. So you're anticipating what the other person will say, and then you're going to summarize it. So it's called a check. And you it's a framework of response to those who object to a certain thing. So it's A for assumption, P for point, E for example, C for counter, and then A for analysis. That's what A stands for. Okay, so what you're going to do is on these 4 issues. In fact, how many rows are there? 1, 2, 3. Actually, no. Choose one of the issues yourself. You can choose only one issue. You can choose whatever issue it is what you want. Because I think doing this for all 4 issues would be too much. So choose one of 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, I know the brothers are going to choose polygamy these ones. And hopefully these guys are going to choose divorce. And some of them will go on inheritance as well, whatever. And then I'll think about maybe what? Say, should we say 7 minutes? So we'll start at 3 o'clock and I'll start asking you to engage. And then we'll talk about it and we'll go to the next slides. Okay? Okay. So I'll give you 7 minutes to talk to the person next. You can talk to the person next to you. Draft an answer using the blueprint that I told you, and then we will feedback.
Situation. This one, this one is
Okay. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This always works, see? This is what we used to do with the kids when I was in secondary school. This is a good technique. All right, let's talking about what we used to do with the kids. We also do a lot of engagement, and that's what we're hoping to do right now. Let's start with what's your name, my friend? Okay. You can both. You choose a person to go. I don't like. Okay. Which one did you choose? Go on. Okay, fantastic. So let me play the part of the angry feminist.
What's the proper definition of one?
Popular definition. Like, no, I mean, there's different translations. The most popular one is that men are maintainers and protectors. That's the most popular one. Some say men are tribal women. That's one of the translations. Anyway, let's just go with you. Say, look, listen. Why is it the case that you have this inherent inequality, where the woman has to obey the husband and she's in this hierarchical thing? Why can't they just be? Is this inherently unjust?
Firstly, I would say, would you say equality equals justice? I would disagree with that, number one. Number two, within the context of a relationship, there's clear differences between a man and a woman. One of those differences I think is a cognitive difference. I don't have, okay, now I'm in,
That's fine, that's fine. But that's not what there's lots of work with already, right? So I like the fact that you said you're challenging the assumption, but I want you to make that more explicit. By using the word, you are assuming that. And then to be more provocative, how can you prove that? Do you see? So now you're challenging the very beginning. So you're assuming that, what was the assumption? If I remember the phrases that we used.
you are saying that equality is justice.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Or equality of value is identicality of roles. Yes, you are assuming that equality of value equals identicality of roles. And then the point you're making is what?
There's cognitive differences between.
So you said there were many differences, including
yes.
these kind of differences, which are backed by science information study. Yeah. Now some may say, well, someone could reply. What could I say? Because this is what the point is. You're anticipating the counter argument. So what would you say? Some may say what?
I should continue.
Yeah.
Basically, one of the studies is from Ian Halpin is sex differences in cognitive ability.
Yeah, brilliant.
So basically, when you go into this into the study, the differences comes across when women goes through menstruation, cognitive ability is affected.
Okay, be careful. The study of that is different. But you're right. I can't say that the size of the cognitive difference. Because the menstruation study is a different one altogether. But you're right. That's good. I like this. You've done the A, you've done the P, you've done the E. Who wrote the other two letters? C and A. And what does C stand for? Counter argument. So you're anticipating the counter argument. What's the counter? What could someone say to you now? And what do you think a feminist would respond to what you just said?
Does it give the right undoubtedly to a man to be responsible?
Yes. Beautiful. That would be a fair enough response. A response is just because they're different doesn't mean they should be treated different. That's the question. So you say the assumption you're making is that they shouldn't be. In other words, that differences shouldn't be accounted. How do you just say you refer it back to them? Because in reality, they're the ones who start with the assumption that despite the differences, you should have equality. We'll come to that in the next thing, by the way. Next. Then what's the A? The A is stands for what? Analysis. So how would you then summarize this?
I would basically summarize it by saying that in total, men and women are different.
Yes.
It's not only down to sex, sort of down to gender. It's down to our cognitive abilities, down to behavioral differences, also down to emotional.
Excellent, excellent. So fantastic. See, that's a good response. It is a good response. And it's the kind of response which is gaining a lot of traction, even in the West now. Okay, so now let's go to somebody else. I don't know whether I'm going to hit you with or not. I don't think it's, I'm going to do that. We can do maybe written responses just to preserve the honesty of that. I mean, I don't mind myself, but I don't want to be crossing lines today. So let's go to the brother there. What's your name? The glasses. No, that's two of them. Yes, you. The one, yes. What's your name? Ahmed what? No, you. Yes, I was speaking to you. I think you tried to run away from us. Huh? You go that side. I'm joking. What's your name? Come on. And is a shampoo with you as well? So tell me now, which one did you choose? Go on. Which one? Of the 1, 2, 3, 4? I don't know. It's not there. Did you choose one? No? Okay, who are you working with? Oh, did you just come in or something? Yeah, maybe. Okay. I won't be on the spot. Put your hands up if you want to be just. How about that? But let me be honest with you guys. You won't have an opportunity to choose when you're out there in the open jungle. The enemy is going to come to you. Yes? It's better for us to make our mistakes here and now. This is the place where we get the. You want to try? All right, come on. Let him try that front. Let him try. No problem. Make our mistakes. No problem. If we make mistakes, there's no issues. Yeah? Go on, tell me that. What's your name?
Mohammed.
Mohammed, mashallah, very good. It's an excellent name. Now, tell me, what did you choose? Polygamy, yes? What did you choose?
Polygamy.
Oh, you did. Let's see how I guess that. So now, I'm going to be the angry therapist. I'm going to shoot you. So, tell me this. I say this. If a man can have 4 wives, why is it not the case that a woman can have 4 husbands? What kind of inequality is this? Do you not know that when a woman, there's a husband who marries on her, it causes her grief and sadness and jealousy and pain? What kind of God would allow this?
So, first we would say that you assume that polygamy is unjust.
Yes.
Due to the fact that you say equality is justice.
Yes.
However, this is not the case due to studies made, let's say, in Zania study,
No, it's okay. But before this, I like how you started. Your first step was good. Your second step was a little bit wobbly. So instead of saying it's not the case, because now you're making an assertion, now you have to justify it and burden of proofs on you. So you're assuming that equality equals justice. Remember, this is a key thing. These are things that ask. Yeah. How do you prove this? You are going to ask. Remember, questions are powerful. You ask them. Can you prove it for me? Yeah.
So you say basically the person who has asked the question.
Yeah, you ask them a question back. Yeah, it's like they slap you in the face with a question. You slap them back in the face with a question. Okay, a question cannot be right or wrong, by the way, according to Aristotle. You can have a wrong assumption of a question, but a question, if you guys have studied Balagha, you studied Balagha, so I think they say what you know, Khabar and Shad. Khabar is what? ما يحتمل الصدق والكذب. Whereas an Inshad is ما لا يحتمل الصدق والكذب. And a su'al is one of the Inshad, which means a question. They got this from Aristotle. That's why that's where it comes from, a bit from logic. A question cannot be right or by something, have no assumptions. But a question itself cannot be right or wrong. So you're always safe. You're throwing punches when you ask a question in case as well. When you get a question, you're defending, you're not in a good position. So as soon as you find you bring it on, then ask the question straight. So what's the question? How do you work?
what you propose to say.
Yes, I love it. Bro, you know you're gonna get out of so much trouble by saying this, by being Socratic all of a sudden. So what kind of proof do you have for this? Then what? Now you say, then you mentioned the study, you said, don't you?
Study in Kenya, David Wilson, like that.
Yes. I mean, I want to put that in. Wasn't the David Wilson, Susan Wilson? James.
Where she said, when they vote, when they speak,
Yeah.
and men and women, there is no evidence to say that.
Excellent. There's not actual evidence when you look at it from a communal perspective that it's harmful as a practice to the community. When you look at it, this is fantastic, by the way. Because the first thing she said was what? It causes harm to the woman, it does this, it goes that. But causing harm to the woman is a very limited analysis. Yes, it will cause some pain to the first wife. There's no doubt about that. But it will cause less pain to the second wife. No, I'm not being facetious. No, number one, it will cause less pain to the third wife. And it's not men doing polygamy on women. It's men and women doing polygamy on women. I mean, statistically and mathematically, yes, more women participate in polygyny. Now, think about it. Because look, sure enough, think about it. So look, the first wife's interested, but then the man gets second, third, fourth. That means him and them are all doing this. So it's like mathematically, they're all engaging in polygamy, maybe at the expense of, mostly at the expense of the feelings. Because I'm not gonna lie, they're not like this. They will feel pain about that. But sometimes Allah allows pain to happen. Pain is not barometer of truth and falsehood. You know, كتب عليكم what? القتال وهو كره لكم وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. It's true, isn't it? You look at this, subhanAllah. Allah is telling the man who's risen upon you is fighting and you hate it. You hate it. Yeah, how could you hate it? And you still Muslim because you're panicking, you could hate something and it's good for you. And you could love something and it's bad for you, and Allah knows and we don't know. Actually, Allah humiliates men. Yes, He humiliates men in the context of who don't want to fight on behalf of the community. It's unbelievable. وَإِذَا أُنزِلَتْ عَلَيْكَ آية محكمة وذكر فيها القتال رأيت الذين في قلوبهم مرض ينظرون إليك نظر المغشي عليهم من الموت فأولى لهم. The other thought about today is that when there's an ayah which is clear cut to Muhammad, an ayah clear cut, it comes down to you, huh? And it's mentioned, fighting is mentioned inside of it. Look what Allah is effectively embarrassing these people. He says they will look at you, O Muhammad, scared and petrified. نظر المغشي عليه من الموت. He's looking at you as if he's going to die. فأولى لهم, it's better for them to fight. يعني, in a situation where they could fight and panicking and maybe urinating themselves with the fear and shooting the gun and all these things, Allah is saying, no, I'm sorry to say, your pain here is not going to be prioritized. Your pain is not going to be prioritized above the communal interest. And Allah is humiliating you. فأولى لهم, it's better for them to fight. Same things, يعني sometimes, not all the time, religion could be all the time. No, it could be. No, I'm not saying all the time, it could be elder. Better than what? Better than, so to say, I'm going to say, like, I'm not sure you saw this clip. Look, nowadays the man is going here, going there, going there, going there. And the son, which one is my father? Is it you? He looks like me, this one. And in South Africa and parts of Africa, we have this issue. Let's be honest about this situation. So, this is the solution. What I'm saying is, going back to the point, using the effective framework is very good. Let's do one more, and then we have some more work to get done. My friend there, the good-looking man over there. No, I said the good-looking man. tell me which one you chose. Okay, everyone's on this. Which one is polygamy is? Okay, tell me now. I'm an angry atheist. I'm saying to you, how could your God allow this? Huh? What kind of inequality is this? What kind of behavior? Why does you have to tolerate this? What kind of religion is this anyway? Of inequality and injustice.
You making the assumption that men and women should be equal.
Yes.
However, there are some exceptions with men where even though people are equal, they still different.
Yeah.
Like in 6%.
Okay, excellent. But what did you miss out here? The question. Remember, you started off pretty well. Yeah. Dodge the punch. You didn't throw the kick. You want to go throw a jab. No. Establish yourself. How do you establish? By saying what? What proof do you have? Straight away, off the bat. It's such an easy question. What evidence do you have for that? Just remember this question. Because for the most part, people don't have to justify it. You'll put it on the back foot and you believe in that. 100%. So go on, ask me.
What proof do you have that men and women should be equal?
Yeah, because why shouldn't they be? This is the modern age. We're not living in the 1950s anymore. Yeah.
But there are some situations where you accept that they have one.
How do you know what I accept? I accept it. In the battlefield, someone said, yeah, well, we should do the battlefield. I'd rather the one on the battlefield than take husband take second wife. She'll take the shot, but she won't take the other. So someone know what to do.
For example, how you were in the first grade and sixth grade the same. So that does not mean that equality equal rates people can compete.
Okay, good. I like this. So see, he's going back and forth. I like this inspiring us and inclusive. This is what we need. But don't tell them what they need. Be careful with this. Always ask. Remember, questions are safe over this. You can also you're wrong. Are you black or white? You're wrong. You have an inappropriate question. What day of the month is it? Yes or no? Oh, sorry, what day of the week is it? Yes or no? Inappropriate question. Okay, makes sense. It doesn't actually question it has an assumption or is a contradictory assumption. I'm not saying it's a contradictory question, it has a contradictory assumption. A question can have a contradictory assumption. Right, for example, the question, can God create a rock so heavy that it can lift? You can't lift it. That is a question with a contradictory assumption. But the question itself is not contradictory. Because you can't have a contradictory question. Because it's not making a truth claim. Because in share, it's not how, right? It's not like anyway, the point is this. You want to go and ask the question now. So, do you believe? Instead of you believe. So, would you agree? That's safe. Would you agree that? So, ask the question.
Would you agree that someone may want to be?
Yeah, I agree with that. Now what? Come on. Deliver the decisive blow. Therefore, what's the overall point you're trying to prove? You don't always agree that differences should be disregarded. If you can get them to agree that differences should be regarded, you've already won the whole thing. If you can get them to agree that differences should be regarded, they've lost. Even if they do to a degree of 1%. Because then the question is, to what extent should they not be regarded? So, you know the blind man and the bus driver example? They would say differences shouldn't be disregarded. A blind man cannot apply to the bus driver because of the communal benefits. But if you agree with the following, a blind man shouldn't be a bus driver because it's in the interest of all of the people in the bus for that not to be the case. And it's the communal benefits. Already you've negated the individual of the condition, number one. And number two, you agree that sometimes the expressions of the individual need to be inhibited for the progression of the community. And that's exactly the argument of religion. We are arguing that the pain of the first wife is going to be lesser in aggregate comparison to the benefit to the community. That's the same argument we've just changed the parameters. Because no bus driver is gonna be so upset if you said you can't mind one company bus. But that's why I couldn't be upset. That's a natural thing. And we shouldn't shame women for that. Because even Aisha, I'm very, very jealous. She broke the plate and it was kind of amazing, And she even said, I'm very jealous. Aisha, when she saw Joyriya, she said, as soon as I saw her, it's like, I hated it straight away. Something she can't say, and furthermore, I know what he says about this. He says that this is, I don't spoken to sisters, but he said that there's a habit where actually they're not even accountable. Like smashing the plate, where she in her right mind for doing. But obviously, someone takes it to malevolent extreme, and they start planning and plotting and doing this and that, and stabbing and poisoning and stuff, and say, well, I know what he said. Anyway, any questions before we go? Yes.
So the references that you mentioned, like the sexual
references
in the studies,
we'll send it to you.
I just.
Oh, you super okay.
But
it's not allowed. Go ahead. Go ahead.
How would you counter feminists saying that these differences are down to societal pressure? Basically, that women tend into these roles because society forces them into these roles.
Excellent question.
That's why they
excellent question. There's a person, he's a scientist, and this is a very provocative thing. It was David Stove. And he wrote, I cannot remember the exact title, but something to the effect of why men are more intelligent than women, something like that. Or the intellectual inferiority of women. That's what he called it. He said it's a study, David Stove, peer-reviewed, called the intellectual inferiority of women. And then some people attacking things on feminists. I saw some articles responding to it. So they call it the intellectual inferiority of David Stove. It's quite funny. But anyway, in this, he argued, this is his argument. He says, look, and for evolutionary, a lot of these women are like feminists, are evolutionary biologists. Yes, they believe in evolution, Darwinism, or whatever. So the argument on the feminist side is that women have not been able to progress as much as men because they have been given what? The opportunity. You haven't been given the opportunity. So he responds, well, from an evolutionary perspective, the fact that they have been prevented from having the opportunity indicates the domination of men and the superiority of men. Because remember, in evolutionary theory, the only thing which is important is how you can subdue your. And why are we, from an evolutionary perspective, significant? We're only significant because we can subdue the animal kingdom. And here in South Africa, we're not even sure if we can do that. Come out to the lions there. I heard some, sorry to say, some Chinese stores got sold by lions or eaten by lions. But in general, the human race has been able to subdue all the other animals. Yes? Survival of the fittest. It's about survivability and reproduction. That's the only thing you should get about. So if you make the argument from their perspective, David Stone is saying, if you make the argument that men have always suppressed women and exploited them and not given them the opportunity, he says, from our perspective, this is exactly the reason why they're better. He says, the reason why they're better is because they've been able to subjugate women and not give them opportunities. And on a strictly evolutionary perspective, it makes sense. You see, obviously, you don't believe in that. I'm just saying to you like that. You can argue on their paradigm. But the point is this, is that, what was your original question? Sorry, I completely forgot your question.
Basically, they say that because, like, as you said, like, they were subdued or society put them.
Yeah, it's a social construct. Okay.
Yes,
So I remember one time, I spent some time on postgraduate level doing gender studies. And I was the only heterosexual in the class, definitely the only man, even though there was some males there. And I went into the lift one time, and there was like, and she had like one of those, the cow rainbow. And I was minding my own business. And she said, look, the penis, sorry to say, she was, the penis is a social construct. That's what she said. And the white boy, the guy was like, yes, yes, I have. And I looked at her, and I wanted to say something in response, because I only had like one floor to get down to the middle of the earth. So then, according to you, rape is a social contract. Because you think, what is rape? It's the end of penetration. So if you remove the penis, you remove rape. And she looked at me like that, I was some kind of a killer. But I'm just saying, the entailment of what you're saying is this. Obviously, we don't believe rape is a social contract. I'm just saying that. The entailment of saying this is a social construct and that is a social construct is that. So the fact is, what is a social construct anyway? A social construct can be fictitious, something which is false. It's possible to have a social construct which is based on truth. In fact, a social construct can be fully true. There's nothing to show, logically or otherwise, why a social construct is wrong. By the way, just on a purely logical level. Society can construct a notion which is actually true. Why is that something which is false? Number one. Number two is, actually, we're arguing on a scientific level. A lot of these third wave feminists in the government actually say science is take a back vote. And forget about science, it's all about how you express yourself and read postmodernism. Yes. But then the problem with that, it becomes a self-defeating statement. Because if you ignore the laws of science, if you ignore the laws of logic, anything follows now. Even your statement could not be coherent. Like the idea that sex is a social construct, gender is a social construct, that idea itself could be said to be a social construct. How do you prove, to go back to the question, that your notion of social construct is not socially constructed? You see, it's infinitely aggressive. So we go back to the evidence, we have to 100 using social construct as some kind of evidence, no evidence whatsoever. You see, and in fact, one can make a second argument, which is the following. Say if, and this is it's called the cross-cultural paradigm, yeah? If something is cross-cultural and historical, what's the coincidence that all of these people constructed the same thing socially? Yeah, for example, the idea that you should have a male breadwinner. Yes? The male breadwinner, it was there from, I don't know, 5,000 years of human civilization. The protector and the breadwinner. It was there at the time of Babylon, Mesopotamia, the ancient Egyptians, the Chinese, the Qing dynasty, that one, this was everyone you like, everyone you like. The idea was there, traditional family laws, the man who did this and that, the breadwinner, the protector. You'll find that if there is examples, the exception to the rule. So how and why is it the case that these civilizations, historically and contemporaneously, that have never met each other and that historically distance from each other 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years, all are inventing the same social construct? Is it some kind of grand collusion? You got to go to the Japanese Empire, he meets the pharaoh somehow in this fictitious land. He says, look, just make sure that everyone else is doing. Whatever you do, choose whatever laws you like, but make sure that everyone else is doing. Make sure that we are the ones with the financial power, make sure this. Yes, let's make sure. That makes no sense. There have to be historical collusion. So there's 3 or 4 things you can say to the social construct. Any other questions? Yes? Oh, left side, yes, please, yeah. Kiwama, okay. Yeah. Excellent. So let me just repeat that because the microphone was on. It says that feminists assume that they're doing women a favor. This is actually a fantastic one because it's not really feminist, by the way, and it's excellent. You know, that the assumption is not coming from women, by the way. Yeah, feminism is not about women, it's about Western women. And usually it's Western white women. Black feminism became popular in the 1960s, 70s, as we'll see. Yeah, third wave feminism. Audre Lorde, bell hooks, and these kind of black figures. But apart from that, the knowledge production comes from the Western Hemisphere. It doesn't come from Nigeria. These feminists didn't go to the Igbo tribe in Nigeria and say, this, come here, the tribes come here. Tell us what you would like to see happen in society. And the woman saying, I would like to see this, and I would like to say that. Let's popularize those ideas. They didn't go to Malaysia, or India, or Calcutta, or Hyderabad, or wherever you go from, wherever you guys from, Gujarat, right? Mostly. They go to this place and sit down and have a nice curries and discuss with the woman what would they like to see. Well, they didn't go to Egypt and speak to the woman and say, like, what would you like? They went to the ivory towers of the Western institutions. And it was those women who get to set the criteria for the rest of the women. In other words, feminism is not women leading women. It's white women leading the rest of the world. So why are we doing all that? You see what I mean? It's not like we're not getting their opinions in Nigeria. So anyway, let's go to this because we've got some work to do. And then we can do some more questions now. Yes?
There's one more thing.
Oh yeah, one more please, yes.
Just quickly.
Yes.
So the second argument is that as a feminist, you cannot assume a voice for all women, including conservative women. This is colonial and takes away from autonomy as the liberal values of freedom of choice.
Absolutely.
Feminism, by these 2 points, is actually anti-liberal and by their definition, morally corrupt.
This is, I think, to be honest with you, they're better just like that. It's going on there today. That was actually very well work. Yeah, excellent. So these are good. And discovering the assumptions, yes, excellent. Let's go to the, so what we're talking about first and second wave feminism. We want a bit of a history. What is it? Look, first wave feminism, some people, historians and others, they started at a talk called Mary Wollstonecraft, who wrote a book called The Vindication of Women's Rights. And this, to be honest with you, if you read the book, it's not negative at all. I mean, a lot of stuff that Mary Wollstonecraft is speaking about points which we would agree with. But she was debating a guy called Rousseau. And Rousseau was actually had some very strong views against women. He said that women shouldn't get involved in education. You know, I mean, we're seeing some people in the Muslim world say stuff like that as well now. But let's just say there's a argument, they shouldn't be educated, they shouldn't vote, they shouldn't get involved in politics. He had very strict views. So what she was responding is that actually a woman can be educated and she can respond to that. If you read the book of Mary Wollstonecraft, you're not going to see the ideas that we're seeing post-1960s. That's really the turning point of the situation. But you had in feminism racism. The idea of, like, for example, you had this Elizabeth Stanton, Millicent Fawcett, and Rebecca Latimer Felton. Rebecca Latimer Felton was openly racist. She said, and she was the first person that was, I think she was a senator in the first female senator in America, yes? And she said something to the effect of, because black people got the vote before women. I'm not sure if you know this yet. Black people in general got the vote before women. In America, women got the vote in 1917 or 1989, I don't remember. Or something like that, yeah? And so black people had before. And she was like, I would lynch 100 black men, yes, before for one woman's right to vote. One white woman's right to vote. So she had some very provocative and racist statements, which shows you that the beginnings of first wave feminism was not about the right of all women. They were self-interested, entitled, narcissist, racist. So imagine this racist that was in the Senate in the United States of America that was against black people. What she would have thought of me and you, let alone the black women, you know, Asian women or African women or whatever you like. She wasn't doing it for you or me. She was doing it for her own self-interest. And this idea of racist colonial feminism is not just something which this Rebecca Stanton, you can say, oh, she was just one person. No, she was the first female senator of the United States of America. And others like her had the same sentiments. And you can read this, it's open secret. Nevertheless, what first wave feminists were arguing for was not something we are fundamentally against. It's the idea of like, okay, people vote and stuff. Of course, we have a discussion about democracy itself and its use and stuff in general, which applies to both men and women. But it's not a situation where we're attacking the family unit in an outright way just yet, for example. So let's go to the next slide. Yes, of course, before that, in England, you didn't have a background where the rights of women were actually shocking from our perspective. We had the idea of wife selling. I'm not sure if you've ever seen or heard of that. They go to the market and sell their wives. There's pictures of the wife with a muzzle on her face and stuff like this, and like an animal thing. And there's there, you can see some sources you can read. Thomas Hardy's Mayor of Casterbridge for more information. But certainly, if you just Google wife selling in the 19th century, they had the idea of selling your wife and stuff like that, which they would use as a legal loophole for certain marital situations. What's it like? Now, interestingly, in 1929, I mean, a lot of the question now about this shubha that comes about, especially with the Prophet's marriage to Aisha at a young age. You'll be very surprised to learn that this was not actually an issue for hundreds of years. It only started to become an issue in the last 100 years. And one of the turning points was 1929, when the minimum age of marriage in the United Kingdom had changed to the age of 16, before it was the age of 12. Most of the West, for example, in the States of America, you could marry a 9-year-old, you could marry an 8-year-old, you could marry a 7-year-old. It was not a problem at all. But this changed after World War I, and there was a particular reason. The Liberal government wanted to re-establish, okay, the infrastructure in the West, and they proposed education as one of the main ways to do that. And so they connected the idea of adulthood with when you finish education. So now you're an adult when you finish education. Before, historically, this was never the case. So the feminist movement actually affected the way we even think of childhood and adulthood as well. Because this was one, if you look at the reason why they enacted this law. After this, by the way, India had the age of consent changed before the United Kingdom. And that was because these arguments were in colonial India at the time. In the 20s, they actually changed the age of consent to a higher level of 18, might be 16 or 18. But the point is that these were inspired by the first wave feministic movements. Go to the next slide. So we mentioned World War I, and this is, it's actually interesting because in 1918, they say it was when the time when the vote was given to women, but that wasn't actually fully true, because it was only given to women over the age of 30. In I think it was 1920 or 1929 or something like that, might have been the same in 1930. That's when they had it over the age of 18. But in 1918, it wasn't actually, the vote was given to women, it was only given to women over the age of 30, which is interesting. So this is first wave feminism. First wave feminism really was a rights movement about getting the vote. Okay, that's the main priority. And as we say, we don't have a major gripe with this, especially considering the fact that the background in the United Kingdom and so on was wife selling and these kind of nonsense practices, and they didn't have much respect for women, as you can see in some of the writings of the Western intellectuals. Go to the next slide. So this is, we'll actually skip this one because this is to do with child marriage and stuff like that. So let's do this one. Second wave feminism, let's get straight to it. When do we do this? Is the most important one for us. Look, third wave feminism is when you have these transgender ideas and stuff. We're not really going to spend too much time on that because most of the shubhat related to third wave feminism. Yeah, most people don't have much shubhat competition, like actual shubhat. Most of the shubhat come from the second wave thing about Qawwama, about inheritance, about actual points of Islamic law. Okay, the whole transgender issue requires an entire treatment, which we're going to speak about now. The LGBT and how to respond to that. That's more connected with third wave. Second wave feminism, it really started in the 1960s. And some of the protagonists of that particular time were Betty Friedan, Simone de Beauvoir, Germaine Greer, and some of the key themes that are related to that particular time was equal pay, abortion, domestic work, institutional marriage, and domesticity. So domesticity, the idea of women being a house worker, working in a household, I don't think that's good. You guys homemaker, something like that. And then emerged this concept which is referred to as domestic drudgery. Domestic drudgery is the idea that you feel resentful and embittered because you are left to do the housework and you feel like it's a trivial task. And that comes directly from feminism. Now, we did say that in the previous sessions, there are some things which don't come from feminism, like some of the attitudes and behaviors and dynamics that relate to women's behavior, but this does come from feminism. You'll see a lot of resentment even within the Muslim community. When a woman is doing the housework, she feels resentful of this community. Where did that come from? For 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years in history, that wasn't the case. We don't have examples of that. This only became a key theme in the 1960s. You know, the idea of mopping up and cleaning and doing this and that. Why should I do it? And how should I do this? And this is a disgusting thing. And changing the nappies and doing the dishes and so on. In the Muslim community, they'll bring out the hadith of you know, he was in the service of his family. But if you read the hadith, he just said he was sewing his own stuff and you know, we went out to the masjid. Yeah, it doesn't mean that he was washing. How dare anyone define hadith of the Prophet cooking and stuff? He wasn't cooking like this, I'm sorry to say. And there's no hadith, at least, that would indicate that at all, cooking for the family and doing this and that and being chef. I'm not saying that it doesn't, I mean, it's haram for a man to do so. And I know there's a discussion in the books of fiqh about houseworks and so on. But at the same time, I will say, if we're looking specifically about the hadith of the Prophet, I'm sorry to say you won't find that level of manipulation going on. Or he's cooking with the family and cleaning and washing the dishes. And sorry. Finding that, I want to look at that myself and see the sources. We're sewing the shoe, and what was the other thing? I cannot remember. Sewing a few things and putting his shoe on or something, and going to the masjid. That's what you'll find in that hadith. He would alleviate from the work of the woman by doing sometimes his own work. And because he's doing his own sewing, this would be a work that actually evidence against him, because it's a work that would otherwise have to be done by the woman. You know, he's trying to be reasonable and respectful and so on. But it's not like, I'm going to become, I don't know, the maid, sorry to say. And there's nothing wrong with being a maid. I'm sure many of you have that at home. I don't. But I might be moving to South Africa just for that reason. I'm just saying the idea of, that, nothing like this. Don't distort. The idea of resentment for the housework, she's doing the dishes with a domestic drudgery which comes from the 90s. Otherwise, I'm sorry to say, you'll not find the course of women getting resentful and angry en masse because they have to change nappies and wash dishes. It doesn't happen. This is a 1960s phenomenon. We'll go to the next slide. Next slide. Oh, sorry. So, as you can see here, and this was exacerbated by, especially Betty for that. She said the house is a comfortable concentration now. Now, being inside the house is a comfortable, it's disrespectful actually, because all these people were Holocaust victims that had to be burnt, and I was reading the book of Viktor Frankl, and he was saying he was naked and splashing and this and Hitler was doing that and burning them with the oven. And you're telling me that you being in the house, potentially with a maid, potentially with this equipment. Even she, it's interesting, I might bring it up. Betty Friedan, she had another book, did you mention that? She had another book where she retracted this. She retracted this because it was extreme thinking of mine. But even though Betty Friedan retracted it, people still use the statement. And why should I be in the house as a comfortable concentration camp? What do you mean it's a comfortable concentration camp? What the hell do you mean by this matter? I mean, in Islam, obviously, you have to, the man to provide for you and do this for you and do that for you. I don't think a concentration camp would provide anything for anyone, except for pain, torment, and punishment. So look at this, interestingly. Betty Friedan, the same woman that said that the house was a comfortable concentration camp for a woman, she wrote another book, which we don't know about, called The Second Stage. And she said, interestingly, after feminism became a big widespread phenomenon in America, that women experienced more psychological stress than before. And this is unbelievable. That one of the main protagonists of feminism is saying, actually, we tried this system and it didn't work. She went and done surveys and studies, sociological studies herself. It's mentioned in her book. She goes, I retract. She had retractions. She goes, it's not comfortable concentration camp. She realized that it's interesting. She even mentioned that have gone out of hand for these women and become like a religion. Wallahi, she mentioned herself that this is now it's out of my hands. This feminism thing is out of my hands. It's become a religion. Evidence doesn't work with these people. It's become a religion. It's a useful fiction for some people. They want to justify their resentment. They want to justify their indifference. They want to justify their anger. It's above and beyond the truth and falsehood. It's about emotions. It's about what we think. But she said it's like religious like. That's what she said. So she done this. Yes, here it is. And she said, remember, in her book, she was saying women shouldn't have children. A lot of them are saying women shouldn't have children. And some people were saying a woman having a child itself is oppressive to her. That's what she was saying. But then she said, well, actually, women have an innate desire to have children. She's changing, she's softening her tone. She's going to speak with women and speaking frankly with them. And she, in her study in the 1970s and 80s, which is 20 years after feminism became big, and now she's realizing she did a mistake. If you go to the next slide. Yes, as you can see, this is what she states. I'm going to use word for word. Fredan says, we had better find a change, but change is hard because women have almost a religious feeling about the women's movement, a sacredness, a reverence, and awe. It keeps us up from asking the question about what really matters to women now. Oh, that's finished. This is Betty Friedan, the same woman that said the house is like a comfortable concentration camp. She's saying this thing will come back to the She's not a Muslim making this up, or apologist, or a Christian pastor. This is the founder, effectively. Some consider her the founder of secular feminism. Saying this thing like a religion. I made a religion, I can't stop it. Truth doesn't matter to me. It's like she created a statue for art purposes, like Michelangelo. And then you see people worshiping to it and all this kind of thing, and you tell them, no, this thing has no power. But it's hard. It's done now because this religion has been established. Once the religion of feminism has been established and the idol has been built, it was impossible for her to break the idol, even herself as the founder of the founders of secular feminism. Let's go to the next slide. And subhanAllah, Jermaine Gray, who happens to be still alive, and there's even videos of her now. She's attacking the transgender movement now instead of the feminists. She says, because she was saying you shouldn't have children, have abortion, just have children. She, like now she's like 80 years old or something, right? And she said in her book, I mourn for my unborn children. And I wish I could tell the people, she doesn't even care about the fact that she told the people not to have children. She only cares about herself. Even that's children losses. About all the other, why don't you mourn for the unborn children and walk them straight? You know, in the Quran, I'm trying to figure out the ayah, Surah Hush. Inni bari'un mink. How does it start? Say again, sorry. كمثل الشيطان إذ قال للإنسان اكفر فلما كفر قال إني بريء منك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين فكان عاقبتهما أنهما في النار خالدين فيها. That is just it's like the shaitan. She's like shaitan, like Lucifer. It says ukfur. It says become a disbeliever. فلما كفر, when he becomes a disbeliever, it's like somebody doing tahrir or pushing someone to do murder. He goes and does murder and says, why don't you listen to me do this? Don't have children, it's not a good idea. No one has children, and the women are upset. She says, I should have had children myself, I should forget about those. We move on. She is double standard of these. These are protagonists. These are the founding fathers of the white feminist colonial movement, apartheid feminist movement. Let's move on. Today we have to be like Nelson Mandela and destroy this movement, or even be stronger than this. 54-year-old de Beauvoir, listen to this. De Beauvoir, subhanAllah, now if you know, I was driving on a road the other day, and it was called de Beauvoir Street, something like that. She is a famous figure, one of the most important figures in feminist history, arguably the most important figure in feminist history. Her and Betty Friedan and Gray are vying for the top spot, let's say. And she wrote a book called The Second Sex. And she's saying that you shouldn't have children, the men are oppressing women, the patriarchy, all the stuff like that. She had a boyfriend. His name was Sartre. John Paul Sartre, yeah? Very famous existentialist. And John Paul Sartre, imagine this, she's telling women equality, this and that. She says about him, he was my true superior. True superior. I've never heard that even from the most conservative woman in my life. My husband, he's the true superior. If I went and sat next to Randy Kate's wife, she would say that about him. This is, this is the leader of feminism saying yes. He was my true superior. And interestingly, he's the one who told her to write a book on feminism. If you look at the story behind it, and the second sex and stuff, it's so interesting. She was in Paris, he came from New York, whatever. She started cleaning the house for him, ready for him. Cleaning the house. She didn't have an ounce of domestic drudgery. Her house was pure to that. She cleaned the rugs and this and that, cleaned it up. And she told us to write a book. She wrote one of the most famous books in history. This is one of the most obedient people I've ever heard. He says, write a book. She writes one of the most famous books in history. She just knows he's coming. She's cleaning the house, picking his bag. Like, I don't know, Mary Poppins, or I don't know who does that. Yeah. And she says, she writes in her journal, he's my true superior. My God, that's a blessedness, the sheer power on the woman. And look what she says. She goes further. She goes, I detest my own reflection. I know what you're saying. I detest my own reflection. If at least my thought had given birth to a hill, a rocket, but nothing has taken place. I'm astonished to realize how thoroughly I have been cheated. She's saying, after she's written the book, she's written this magnum opus that all these women are going to, it's their new Quran, effectively. It's their new Quran, it's their Bible. They'll do everything for it, yeah? She's saying, this thing I just saw, I don't think it was good enough. It wasn't all bad. I think I've been cheated. Why did she feel cheated? Because her boyfriend told her to write something. She did it for his sake, and she's looking at it. Who would be foolish enough to read this and follow this? Little did she know that it was a lot of people that were going to follow this nonsense. So if we continue, here, look, she's preparing her new independent home in Paris and waiting for the return of Sartre from Paris. New furniture, she bought new furniture. It's not like she just cleaned the house. She went out and got a new sofa. She said, no, I can't have the sofa with this guy. I have to get him a new sofa. Maybe a new bed. The walls papered. She changed the walls. My God. And new clothes purchased. And look at this guy. Now we know where feminism came from. This is my theory. Because the truth of the matter is, Sartre, the reason why he was influenced, of course, he was influenced by he hated the idea of a family life. He wanted to be he was a bachelor. He wanted to be a free man. He didn't want to be committed to this one Simone de Beauvoir. You see pictures of her, she wears a hijab, she wears like something on her head. I don't know why. But anyway, the point is that you can see videos of her speaking online and stuff. Simone de Beauvoir. But she hated he hated the idea of, he didn't like family life. So obviously she wants to please the guy. She loves him. She's changing her furniture for him. She's changing her walls for him, wallpaper. So, and cleaning his cooking style, and this is calling him the true superior. So whatever opinion he's going to have, she's going to have. And his opinion was anti-family opinion. So feminism wasn't started by women. It was started by a good man here, Sartre, who didn't want to be responsible for a family and be committed to a family. That's really where it came from. If you think about it, the inception of feminism, it was a man who invented it. One of the things, you know what I mean? Can you have it? And then he used to humiliate her. He said, look, you're a mere housewife. Which indicates that she was doing a lot of housework. How can he call her a housewife if she wasn't cleaning and this and that? So she started writing books for his request. I was furious with myself to have disappointed him in this way. Look at that, man. She was madly in love with him. It was him. It was his idea all along. Feminism, philosophical secular feminism came from a man. A French man. When we look at what they're doing to us right now, the Muslims, and what they think of the Muslims, and the annexation of Algeria, this guy had nothing to say about the annexation of Algeria and the killing of raping of all the women. He didn't stand up and say this was wrong. And it was not far away from his lifetime. You think this guy was about women's rights? He, in his own country, was annexing France, was annexing Algeria and raping women and this and that, and anything. You will not find anything from Sartre. If anything, you will be supported. Because no one dared go against the political elites in France at that time. What are we talking about, guys, here? We're talking about defunct ideas from defunct people. So let's continue. Can you see now? And moreover, the defunct ideas, which now we know where they come from, that come from defunct people, are ineffectual, actually, because this is the biggest study that's ever been done on women's health, mental health, in the West. It's Blanche Flower and Oswald's study from 1970 up until 1990 in both the UK and the USA, and they asked women, how do you feel? And obviously there's been changes in legislation and law. Now equal pay is there, now this is there, now equal opportunities and feminism. And you know feminism is part of the equation now. And could it be a coincidence that this time exactly is when women experience the worst mental health crisis in their history? According to the study, I don't know how many people were in that study, 100,000. 100,000 participants. You know what that means in the study? Try and find a study nowadays which has 1,000 participants, if you like. Most of the Pew Research stuff you see have 1,000. This has 100,000 participants. Women from both Britain and USA, they're saying no, 80%, 90% say we have a worse life now. What would you want? It doesn't work, it comes from defunct people, it comes from the defunct ideas, wrong ideas, unprovable ideas. And they are hurting women with this idea. Because a woman doesn't want this psychologically. It's not her nature to want these things. What more do you want? Even the founders of this religion, better for that, it's become like a religion, and I retract these statements. There's nothing more that you can ask for that you have. But when you understand that feminism hardens women, and you understand that's not working and it's unprovable, then why are people so attracted to it? Still an interesting question. Let's continue. Next slide. And feminists know men and women are different. Look at this is what Aristotle said. Look, treat like cases as like. This is the quote. As we said before, the assumption is very important. Feminists know that men and women are different. Look at the Mohammed. She writes a whole track, called a whole chapter on in her book of biology. And in that chapter, she's saying men and women are different. You know what she says? Listen to this. You'll not believe it. She says women are more emotional than men. You know that hadith of the Prophet we spoke about in the previous session? Women are more emotional than she said. That's not more emotional. Exactly what the Prophet effectively said. But it comes from the feminists, the founder of secular feminism. No one, I've not seen a repudiation of this in the secondary source material. But when it comes to a religious framework, no, there's repudiation. She even goes further. She says that, you know, a woman is more likely to cry and have a nervous breakdown, and she's neurotic, and she's weaker, and she's losing a fight, and she's slower than him. She has a whole list of things. It's not like nowadays feminists even make the wrong argument according to the feminist literature. Because they'll say, no, men are the same. I remember I was in university once, and there was a Muslim sister, not wearing hijab, nothing. And we were waiting for class, and she was a fool. She had low IQ. And she thought she was making fun of this argument. She was like, yeah, men and women are the same, and they should be even in sport, the same, not like martial arts, everything. So one guy just flipped and said, okay, how much do you weigh? She goes, yeah, I'll be involved in that. And he said, how much do you weigh? She didn't want to answer the question. It was a very good question to say, but and he just said, you weigh about 65 kilograms, right? And she nodded in reluctance, yeah? Yeah, because I weigh about 65 kilograms. There's a ring outside. Let's just test your theories. Can we test your theory? like, there is no comparison. There is absolutely no comparison between a man and women's sports. Like, let me, for example, a sprinter. Now, you can argue the black West Africans are beating everyone, and the Jamaicans. The Jamaicans effectively are there. I mean, the disparity between white men and black women in sports is it's not as bad in sprinting as between women and men. It's not as that deep. But it's a huge disparity. Just like there's never been a white man that's won 100 sprints, there's not been a black man that's won the swimming pool. I'm sure you think about one guy. So there are disparities between races, and they have, like Ethiopian people, they're very good at long distance. I tried to do a marathon once, the ambulance came afterwards for me. Well, I went to Bergen in Norway, and the ambulance came. So it's not, I'm not built for this kind of thing. Everyone's built for something. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the sprinting numbers, like, for example, the Olympic sprinter for 100 meters for a woman, it's not even entry level for the nation. Like, her top number is like 11 seconds or something like that. Whereas Usain Bolt was 9.6. It's a huge difference in sprinting terms. Like an average boxer man would get, Anthony Joshua got like 11 seconds. Iran got 11 seconds, same, like the Olympic champion of the world. It's like in sport. Or 10 point something seconds, I can't remember what it was exactly. This is ridiculous. I mean, there is no comparison. You see what I mean? There's no comparison. So they know that. People now are making arguments. Yes? They're making arguments as if there is some comparison and so on. And now we're seeing a big tension between the transgenders and the secular feminists. And as I mentioned, we'll talk about that more in detail tomorrow. So we'll go to the next slide. And we've talked about that in the previous one, so I won't mention the sexual differences. And that one we spoke about again, so, and that one we spoke about. Yeah, okay, so this is interesting. A very interesting book that you want to read is The Myth of Male Power. It's a classic, really, on this topic. On the topic of feminism, it's called backlash literature. The Myth of Male Power is one of the first things that was written on academic to challenge feminism within the West. And he makes a series of very, very interesting examples and so I'm not going to go into it, you can read it yourself. Very good book. I highly recommend it. So we'll go to the next one. But the idea of, actually go back a second, because there's one thing. The idea of patriarchy is important. Because the idea of patriarchy is we have men controlling women, but there's exploitation going on at the same time. There's exploitation going on at the same time. And for example, like we said, in the feminist literature, if you take on strict feminism grounds, if a woman has to raise more children, this is seen as more exploitation. Because remember, if you have a child, it's exploitation. So if you raise more children, it's more exploitation. Makes more sense. It's like oppression is completely double than quadruple. However, Warren Farrell makes a very interesting example. He says this. He says if a woman is in charge of 3 people in a job, she's responsible for 3 people. And then she becomes responsible for 5 people in a team. Is what's happening here? Is her power increasing or not? On a capitalistic framework, her power is increasing. She's managing more people. But the influence that she would have on her children is more than the influence that she would have on the employees. So he says that why do you have a double standard that you would think a woman manager in charge of 5 people better than 3? For example, her influence and power increases, but when she is in charge of 5 children rather than 3, you consider that to be a reduction, even though the influence on a woman or a child is much more than an employer and an employee, way more. And that's one of the great things that Allah has given women. That He hasn't always talked about polygamy. But the truth of the matter is, if you get children and ask them to choose between their mother and their father, 9 out of 10 times when there's something is going on, they will choose their mother. The love they have for their mother is going to be more than the father. And the Prophet said that they are more entitled to companionship. 3 times. That's a massive, massive deal. The only reason why that's been trivialized is because parenthood has been trivialized. Motherhood has been trivialized. And that is one of the great injustices of the feminist movement. They made you think that being a mother is a reduced role, when in fact, the world has known for millennia that it is the most important role. And to prove this, a child would die for their mother, and the mother would die for their child. Yani, if your son, a son would die for the mother, if someone tries to attack the mother, most sons of age would defend their mother to a point of death. And the mother would be willing to do the same thing. That is one of the deepest relationships that no other relationship in human civilizations has ever known. How can you trivialize such relationship? Because no employer would die for their employee, and no employee would die for their employer. So which is a more valuable relationship? Where both recipients, in a symmetrical and reciprocal style, are in love with the other party to the extent that they're willing to put their life on the line, give their life for the other person, or a relationship which is solely based on transaction and money. And if that is removed from the equation, then the whole relationship is destroyed. How could one idea of power be prioritized over another? So because the great right that Allah has given the mother in Islam, that even when it says وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, there's two words in the Arabic language for parents. Al-abawan wal-walidan. In the Quran, this is the two major words that's been used. And abawan comes from ab, it means father. But it's like your parents, but it's mentioning both parents through the father. But walidan comes from wilada, it comes from giving birth. So it emphasizes the mother. You see? So when it says وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, inbuilt within the logical structure is actually an emphasis on the mother. You have to be excellent to both your mother and your father, but inbuilt within that is think who gave birth to you. Think about who gave birth to you. The point I'm making is this: the feminist movement, one of the great crimes, intellectual crimes, is that it's attacked the institution of mother. And the third way we're going to speak about that next time. What time is it now? It's just okay, 5 minutes over. In this time, I'm going to give you guys a chance to ask some questions and also this slide as well. And then, inshallah, tomorrow we'll start off with some live interaction, and after that, we'll cover that later. So, any question? Yes?
Yeah, the difference between normal feminism and Islamic feminism.
So, Islamic feminism really is a contradiction in terms, effectively. But those who consider themselves Muslim feminists, people like Amina Wadud and others, many scholars of Islam consider them to be apostates from the religion of Islam. Why? Because they look at verses in the Quran and they reject them. Right? For example, Amina Wadud is seen as the front bearer of, torch bearer of so-called Islamic feminism. She said that 434 here, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. This verse is talking about the men are maintained as a woman and so on, up until while we were born and so on. She says no. She literally said, well, I don't change this gap, I reject this. And then she proceeds to attack and kill the prophets. Like Ibrahim alayhi salam, she calls him a deadbeat father. Because look at him, he left his family and he left. Which means that what kind of father is he? She attacks Ibrahim alayhi salam. So some scholars have said, no one can say this and remain Muslim. So most of these people, Islamic feminists, either they leave the religion of Islam to kufr akbar, like Amina Wadud, most ideas according to some scholars, and some other of them, they are on the verge and effectively are trying to put contradictory ideas in. So, I mean, I'm not saying anyone who ascribes to Islam a Muslim feminist, you should make it feel better, and of course you know better than that's incorrect, because he has the white man short and so on. But I'm saying that these two, if you understand feminism in the way that's classically understood by the literature, there's no way to reconcile like it. If you're saying, can you be a man, a Muslim person and believe in women's rights? We're saying we believe in women's rights, but women's rights within our own paradigm. Feminism doesn't have a monopoly on women's rights. Feminism is a white colonial project that has one interpretation of women's rights, which has been repudiated time and time again. That's what it is. Feminism is one interpretation of women's rights. Does that answer the question? Yes. Yes.
And morality is a dichotomy. You see, that's subjective or objective. Now, shouldn't that, is that an ideal way to initiate?
It's excellent, a very good point. Yeah, I think you should say, do you believe that your ideas are objectively true? In the same way that 2 + 2 = 4 is objectively true. Yeah, 2 + 3 = 4 is 4. It's 2 ways, it's true, logically speaking. 2 + 2 = 4. In mathematics, you have different proofs. You can prove things. In science, you have proof by induction. In logic, you have things like abduction, you have deduction. These are all ways of proving things human beings here. This building, which has been wonderfully constructed, relies on the rules of geometry and relies on basically mathematics, effectively. Certain calculations, there's a certain thing here, the arch certain way. It's based on objective true measures, which can be shown through demonstration. Feminism is not like this place, because if it was, it would be one told us we'd be trouble. And the Quran mentions this. You might be saying, how could the Quran mention that? It does mention Surah Al-Mu'minun, وَلَوْ اتَّبَعَ الْحَقَّ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ لَفَسَدَتِ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. How amazing. That if the truth had followed their desires, the heavens and earth would have crumbled and been destroyed. Meaning what? That these ideologies are not based on geometric patterns and truths and mathematics, based on people's desires, emotional arguments. And had the truth been based on emotional arguments, the universe, which is based on finely tuned laws, would have been destroyed. Just like if feminism was based on the truth here, this house would crumble upon us, we would have been dead. And it is crumbling upon us, but in a metaphorical sense. It's crumbling the households and the families. It's creating delinquencies in children. It's creating pathologies. It's creating mental health for women. So when you have an architect or an ideology which is themselves defined, then you have the consequences of that, which is ramifications of a very similar kind. Yes.
Given the shift in our economy after the Industrial Revolution from a system primarily based on manual labor to one favoring cognitive problem-solving skills, do you believe the rise of feminist ideology and the push for gender equality were inevitable? As the changing economic structure started to level the playing field, providing women with increased economic influence, could it be argued that this progression directly led to policy changes reflecting women's needs and
I think you're right. I think a lot of it is to do with economics. But it's not just economics from the woman's side, it's economics from the man's side. Don't forget, feminism favors the white man, like in an apartheid sense. Because think about it, right? What does feminism mean? It means that half of the workforce playing their language will go to work. In the Western world, who have been the politicians? White men, 80 to 90% of the time, the liberal agenda. That's a fact. That's a fact. It's objective. It's not just in the apartheid South Africa. It's in the Western world. That's a fact. 95% of the Western world, until from the 19th century up until now, white men with a liberal agenda. Okay. Now, what do they want? They want money in their pocket, just like the drug dealer outside wants money in his pocket. So how does he want money in his pocket? Okay, more people work for him. So, okay, now you're going to put 50% of the workforce, they're going to give him homage and give him 30% of the taxes. Of course, it makes sense for the white man. That's why feminism favors the white man. And not just the white man, the elite white man. The one who's at the height or the top of the economic hierarchy. The white politician. It favors the white elitist. It doesn't favor the socially deprived white man. It doesn't favor that guy, it favors the elitist white man. So because effectively these guys are in control of the West, they will sit on the table and say, what favors us? Their self-interest. Women going out and working and paying 30% of their taxes for their pocket, for their bank account, of course. Why should a woman be at home and these men, yes, benefit from this woman and we don't benefit from this woman? But the reason why they got the idea wrong is because they prioritize the economy over what? The society, and as in so doing, they've actually damaged the economy as well. Because what they didn't realize is some intangibles in this equation. It's true that when you take 50% out of the workforce of women, that you lose immediate money in the GDP of the country. That's true. Effectively, that is true. But when you don't have nuclear families, you have kids that grow up in delinquency, which is time and time again shown. Their educational level is lower, their crime increases, which means the state has to pay money for all of that. So the money that you're paying from them, you're losing this. Which is why civilization has been used for years. Do you not think the Roman Empire wanted to maximize money? But they realized, okay, if we don't have poor families, they won't have people that are grown up in military households, that they have proper functioning mother and father. They realized that. The old wisdoms prevailed. But now they just were so money hungry, their god is Mammon, the god of money. That they are willing now to put the woman in the family. what's going on in the West. Then let's just look at it. Look at the crime in the West. Look at it. Unbelievable. People are running away now from the West. Look at Detroit in America. Look at Philadelphia in America. Look at London, the stabbing. 1,000 people dying in 1 year. Look at this place. I mean, people are being shot and killed as well. Why? If they had functional homes, would this be reduced or increased? It would be reduced 100%. If they knew who their fathers were, they knew who their mothers were, and they prioritized families, it wouldn't happen. So clearly, they didn't think about the intangibles, the sociological intangibles. They did think about economy. Both recipients, the white man and the career woman, they were in a collusion together at the expense of the entire society for the last 50 years.
What's a practical way of removing or protecting our women from these ideologies?
The thing is, honestly, the women and men both have to look at this thing and make a decision. There's no way of inoculating them anymore or insulating. Even like nowadays, I have a friend of mine who went to the Congo. He said, I came out of the Congo and his child minders were on their mobile phone watching YouTube. Yeah, the world, you cannot protect or insulate. I think the insulation approach, if you put it to the extreme, it won't work. You need to offer argumentation. You need to show them the evidence. And effectively, you need to show them the benefits on a practical level of being in a traditional household. Yeah, if for example, we have men that are very, very stingy, and that, every little thing she can't do, and she's watching the wife woman enjoying herself, she's in the house, and she's not getting, the man is being very stingy on her, and not giving her a good life, not letting her enjoy her time. Human beings are creatures of comparison. So there needs to be effort on the side of men as well, to make their women feel like women feel like they actually live a good life. Because if they feel like that, they will not rebel effectively. There needs to be someone. Now, if you look at the Arab Spring, you saw some countries rise up as well. What countries did it? Morocco did it, and Saudi Arabia did it. They didn't have revolutions. Why? Because their government, as soon as they saw it, started putting money in the field. I know it sounds very materialistic, but I'm saying that you cannot offer an alternative. The Islamic alternative must be beneficial for the woman. You have to create an atmosphere of benefit. That's the truth. Not just show arguments, because arguments are all well and good, but the practical day-to-day life, they need to see tangible benefits in their life. You need to be generous with your woman. You need to be, take them to different places, give them different things, make them not feel like they're being constricted. Because if the resentment goes to a certain level, that's what they do. Because they think the life is there, the good life is there. Obviously, the prophetic advice is that marry a woman who's religious, because a woman who's zahid, just like a man who's zahid, he's not going to care too much about that material things anyway. اذهب فيما عند الناس يحبك الناس واذهب اذهب في الدنيا يحبك الله اذهب في الدنيا يحبك الله واذهب فيما عند. So zuhd, that's very important as well.
Okay, sorry to.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It's just because there's quite a lot of questions from the side of these.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to read it now.
Please. Yeah.
Question 1, you mentioned that biological research that supports Islamic positions will not be approved by ethics boards today. This is creating a hegemonic academic worldview. What can Muslim academics do positively for faith-affirming research in such spaces? Because in 20 years, you won't have studies in science.
That's a very, very good point. It's true as well. Because look, I have friends of mine in the same institute. I have students, like, for example, from the University of Oxford and stuff. I have one particular student, University of Cambridge. He was doing a psychology course. And he went in as an undergraduate at a time where they actually changed the course because they had so much. There was a module on gender differences. They took it out. They removed the module because they said that module now is going to exacerbate discrimination against men and women. It was a factual module. What do you do about the situation now? The West is now starting to control the situation. We have to recognize two things. Yeah. 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. So we have to recognize two things. The West has always used science for their own purposes. Even Hitler used science for his own purposes. Look at the eugenics programs that he was creating. It was all backed by science. Darwin himself, who wrote The Origin of Species in 1859, he said the black man is an inferior to the white man, and he's got, I don't know how he said this, he said on his feet, you got a farm on his feet. he assumed because he's like a monkey, he's like got the thumb on his feet. And then Hitler used this information and he propounded it for eugenic purposes. He says, yes, the white man is the best. You've got the Aryan race at the top. Yes. And by the way, it's linked to liberalism as well. I can show you some. To be fair, John Stuart Mill he was against it. But other liberals of his time were not. They were open races. They believed the inferiority of other races and the superiority of the white race. And it seems to sway into Indian culture, and it's been there in Indian culture for a very long time. The Brahmins at the top of the country, the Hindu religion and all this kind of stuff, right? And then it was exacerbated by colonialism. When the white man came into the top guys, so you might know a little bit about it. What I'm saying is that Hitler used that. So he weaponized science in order to achieve political objectives. Now, do not assume that science, although there is good science, is not susceptible to being used for political agendas. Nowadays, you have like people, proponents of, say, for example, the ketogenic diet. I was looking at this myself as a paleo diet. They're paying money for peer-reviewed research to show that their diet is the best one. The eggs one or the low meat one. It's like, if you want to go and see what's the best diet for you as a person right now, is it paleo, is it keto, is it pescatarian diet, is whatever, you will be bombarded with so many contradictory scientific information. Why? Because all of them is about money. Who's running the studies and what they're saying. So what I'm saying to you is, yes, science has its limitations. It can be politically leveraged. It can be politically leveraged. And of course, you need to know more about that. You have to study the philosophers. However, having said that, what's done is done. The studies that have been done, it can always be cited now. And if it changes dramatically, then we know why. You could easily cite the reason why that's been happening. So yeah, to answer your question, and what do we do as Muslim people? Is we have to start creating our own senses of power, effectively in technology, and try to catch up in science and technology. The Muslim Muslims catch up. Can you imagine, for 95% of the Muslim world's existence, we have been either the superpower or one of the superpowers. It's only for 10%, or sorry, 5 or 10% of its existence that is in the situation that is now. We had the golden age of science and technology. Now we're very weak when it comes to science and technology. So yes, there needs to be people that take initiative on this topic. There needs to be new scientific enterprises and initiatives, the technological enterprise initiatives that Muslims do for the purpose of making Allah's word the highest.
And what do you think is the biggest factor of neo-colonial influence on gender flourishing in Muslim culture?
Say that, I don't hear. Say again.
What do you think is the biggest factor of neo-colonial influence on gender flourishing in Muslim culture?
For gender flourishing.
The neo-colonial influence on gender flourishing.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that's happening now, as you can see, on like Hollywood and Netflix and stuff like that, is that they're injecting their ideas in a very, very, very creative manner. Very creative. I have to give them credit. I actually watched some Netflix programs myself. Some of them I couldn't continue watching. I just couldn't handle it. I was getting angry by it. Because the thing is, when you tell a story is impervious to criticism. Just like if I give an argument, right? If I tell an argument, you can say this is right, this is wrong, because of this reason. But if you watch a movie about the life of a homosexual person and how they're crying and begging and doing this and that and they're oppressed and whatever, you humanize and you sympathize and you empathize with them, and there's no argument being made. So as humans, we become desensitized to that kind of thing. I was looking at the Oscars website. You know, the Oscars is the top, the creme de la creme, the elite, Hollywood award given to people that are in the movie industry. And now they've actually put it in the website that you have to fulfill a quota of like 5% of the characters have to be LGBTQ. That's why you'll find the female Hulk and this one and that one. And people are not even watching these movies because no one's interested in them. It's the worst time for movie making in Hollywood history. Because the protagonists, if you look at the IMDb top 100 movies ever made, you'll find that the majority of them are male protagonists. Because people like the alpha male and all those kind of figures. The moment they remove that and put a female protagonist or an LGBT protagonist or whatever, people are not interested in this nonsense. It's just uninteresting to me. You don't want to watch it. Therefore, I think it might change because there's an economic factor related to it. But the fact of the matter is there is an ideological influence. And their way of putting the point across is not just making arguments on a stage like this, you can write it down in statistics and science and biology, etc. They have a more powerful way, and I will admit this freely of making the argument, which is to get $100 million or $1 billion, okay, and put it into a series and inject slowly, subtly the ideas into the minds of the youth. Very, very well played, I have to say. So then we have to respond in kind. We have to be creative. The creative writers have to come out and start attacking. Look, the Prophet ﷺ, when the poets were attacking the Muslim people, he sent poets to attack them. He said, Hassan ibn Thabit and Abdullah Rawaha and Hizbul the last ayah of Surah Al-Shu'ara, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَانْتَصَرُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا, is actually about the poets that they respond in poetry. So now if people are making stories to try and promote the LGBT, we have to make stories for our kingdom, our civilization interests as well. Like in the Indian context, there's a very famous film called Tipu Sultan. And there's some movies made about him that was an attempt. And there's some things written about him as a fantastic figure, frankly. And there's some other individuals that you know, we can glorify our history, yes. You can like Arthur. I don't know watch this, but I heard it's fantastic in one way. Obviously, it might have muharramat or whatever, but we'll try and remove muharramat and we'll try and create something which the youth can consume. Maybe someone can create a cartoon for the youth. All of the Islamic cartoons that I've seen have not been up to scratch. I mean, maybe there's 1 or 2 here or there, but Peppa Pig is not those. And the father is humiliated with that. Peppa Pig, the father is, oh, silly, what's his name? What's his name, that guy? The father pig, Danny Pig, whatever his name is. What's his name? I don't know what his name is. Oh, silly one. One time I saw my daughter, she was she was silly about this one. So I know where you got that from. So I banned Peppa Pig. And even that incident, it's well recorded in family history. She was watching on a thing, and I smashed the thing, and I'll figure it out. They're humiliating us with cartoons, with Peppa Pig. Ned Flanders in The Simpsons, humiliated. It's a religious figure. You know, he's humiliated. Why are they doing this? Because they have the creative capacity, they have the money. This costs money. That industry will require money for it. So the fact that they're pumping so much, there needs to be a fight. We need to be creative, not just rational. Do you have any more time? Okay, with that, good. So I'll see you tomorrow.
In general, the program will commence at 9:30 sharp tomorrow. So all brothers and sisters are requested to come on time. All the men folk will proceed for Salah at 1:30. There will be a program after the Isha Salah.